In 1845, the British Empire, at the absolute peak of its global power, set its sights on the final unsolved prize of navigation, the Northwest Passage. To conquer this frozen labyrinth, they didn't just send an expedition, they sent a statement. HMS Erebus and HMS Terror. These weren't just ships, they were the most advanced technological marvels of their time. Their bows were reinforced with thick iron plates to smash through ice. They carried auxiliary steam engines in an age of sail. They were stocked with a 3-year supply of preserved food in tin cans, a revolutionary technology that promised to end the ancient naval scourge of scurvy. Their commander was Sir John Franklin, a celebrated, if aging, Arctic veteran. Under him, 128 of the Royal Navy's finest officers and sailors. Their morale was high. The public was euphoric. They were, by all accounts, invincible. In July 1845, 2 whaling ships spotted them in Baffin Bay, waiting for the ice to clear. It was the last time any of them were seen alive. They sailed into the white void and vanished. 129 elite men and 2 of the world's most advanced ships gone. For years, the silence was total. It became one of the greatest mysteries in the history of exploration. But what really happened to the Franklin expedition wasn't just a case of bad luck or bad weather. The truth, buried under the ice for over 170 years, is far more horrifying. They weren't just lost. They were doomed from the start, and the very technology they trusted to keep them alive was the silent killer that poisoned them all.
The mission was simple: find the last uncharted link of the Northwest Passage. Sir John Franklin, at 59, was given command. He was a popular figure, but his recent Arctic journeys had been marked by near disaster and accusations of poor leadership. Some in the Admiralty worried he was too old, too slow. But the ships were magnificent. HMS Erebus and HMS Terror were veteran polar vessels, already proven in the Antarctic. For this mission, they were refitted with 20-horsepower steam engines taken from railway locomotives, capable of pushing them through the ice at 4 knots. And then there was the food. The expedition was provisioned for a long haul. Over 8,000 tin cans of preserved food, soups, vegetables, and meat were loaded into their holds. This was supposed to be their greatest advantage. Tinned food was the 19th century equivalent of space-age technology. It meant they wouldn't have to rely solely on hunting or risk scurvy from a lack of fresh produce. The confidence was so high that they even packed a library of 1,200 books, a hand organ, and fine silver cutlery to dine with. They weren't just exploring, they were bringing Victorian England to the ice.
1 year passed. Silence. 2 years. Silence. Back in England, minor concern grew into national anxiety. Franklin's wife, the formidable Lady Jane Franklin, became a relentless force. She pressured the Admiralty, offered huge rewards, and shamed the government into launching one of the largest search and rescue operations in history. Dozens of ships, both British and American, sailed for the Arctic. The mystery of Franklin became a global obsession. In 1850, searchers found the expedition's first wintering camp on Beechey Island. The scene was eerie, but not alarming. They found the remains of a storehouse, workshops, and other signs of a well-organized, disciplined winter camp. And they found 3 graves. 3 men who had died in the spring of 1846. The inscriptions were routine: John Torrington, John Hartnell, William Brain. The assumption was that they had died of natural causes, perhaps pneumonia or tuberculosis. But there was no note, no letter, no arrow carved in stone pointing to where they had gone next. After wintering, the Erebus and Terror had simply sailed on and disappeared again.
The searchers found nothing else. For 4 more years, the ice kept its secret. Then in 1854, an explorer for the Hudson's Bay Company named John Ray was mapping the Boothia Peninsula. He encountered a group of Inuit hunters. What they told him would scandalize the British Empire. The Inuit spoke of a group of kablunas, white men, seen a few years prior trekking south on the ice near King William Island. They were desperate, gaunt, and dragging a large lifeboat. They were starving. Later that season, the hunters told Ray they found the men's final camp. It was a scene of unimaginable horror. There were corpses, some dismembered. There were human bones, cracked open. In the cooking pots, they found human remains. The Inuit presented John Ray with artifacts from the expedition to prove their story. Silver spoons and forks, a star of the Order of Hanover belonging to Sir John Franklin himself. When Ray's report reached England, it was met with outrage. Victorian society was appalled. Charles Dickens himself led a public campaign to discredit the Inuit, calling them savage liars. The British public refused to believe their naval heroes would resort to the last taboo. They preferred to imagine Franklin and his men dying as noble, Christian gentlemen, frozen like statues in the ice. But John Ray was right, and the Inuit had told the truth.
It took another 5 years to find the expedition's Rosetta Stone. In 1859, a search mission led by Leopold McClintock, funded by Lady Franklin, arrived at King William Island. Near a place they named Victory Point, they found a stone cairn. Inside, under a pile of rocks, was a single, standard-form naval document. It contained two messages that charted the expedition's entire downfall. The first message was written in the margin. It was dated May 28, 1847. It was cheerful. It stated that the Erebus and Terror had been trapped in the ice since September 1846, but that all was well. Sir John Franklin was still in command. Then, around this optimistic note, a second, desperate message had been scrawled. It was dated almost a year later, April 25, 1848. It reported that the ships were still trapped. They had been besieged by the ice for a year and a half. And then, the devastating news. Sir John Franklin had died on June 11, 1847, just 2 weeks after the all-well note was written. The total number of dead was now 24 men, including 9 officers. The remaining 105 survivors, now under the command of Captain Francis Crozier, were abandoning the ships. Their plan, to march south over the ice to Back's Fish River on the mainland. For over a century, this was where the story ended. The narrative was one of bad luck, 2 ships trapped in a bad ice year, forcing a desperate march that failed. But the note and the Inuit testimony raised darker questions. Why did 24 men die before they even abandoned the ships? Why did Franklin himself die so early, when all was well? And why were the men seen by the Inuits so sick, so confused, so mad? The answer was found not in the ice, but in the bodies themselves. In the 1980s, a team of scientists led by Dr. Owen Beatty exhumed the 3 bodies from Beechey Island, the men who died in 1846. He performed autopsies. The bodies were perfectly preserved by the permafrost. He found they likely died of pneumonia, but he also found something else, something systemic and shocking. In their bone and hair samples, he found astronomical levels of lead. This was the first clue to the horrifying truth. The expedition was being poisoned, but from where? The source was the very technology that was supposed to save them, the 8,000 tinned cans of food. This is the great tragic irony of the Franklin expedition. The contract for the food was awarded at the last minute to a cheap new supplier named Stephen Goldner. His company was rushed. To seal the cans, they used thick, sloppy seams of lead solder,
on the inside of the tins. Every meal Franklin's men ate for 3 years was a dose of poison. The lead leached directly into their food. Lead poisoning is a slow, insidious killer. It doesn't just damage the body, it attacks the mind. It causes crippling stomach pain, weakness, and fatigue. But worst of all, it causes severe neurological decay, confusion, paranoia, irrationality, and eventually madness. This explains everything. It explains why Sir John Franklin died so early. He was an older man, more susceptible to the poison. It explains why 23 other men died with him, long before starvation was a factor. They were dying of lead poisoning. And it explains the final, horrifying death march. The 105 men who left the ships in April 1848 weren't healthy heroes making a brave last stand. They were men who were already dying. They were weak, their bodies racked with pain, their minds clouded by lead-induced insanity. And they were also suffering from scurvy. The tinned food, which they believed would protect them, was cooked at such high temperatures that it destroyed all the vitamin C. They were poisoned by their food, and they were starved of nutrients by their food. The final march south was not a disciplined retreat. It was a confused, agonizing crawl. They died one by one, leaving a trail of skeletons and discarded equipment across the ice. The Inuit stories of madness were true, and the stories of cannibalism. In the 1990s, forensic analysis of bones found on King William Island confirmed it. The bones showed clear cut marks, consistent with defleshing and the cracking of bones to get at the marrow. It was the final, desperate act of men who were no longer fully human, driven by lead poisoning, starvation, and the absolute brutal cold.
The mystery had one last chapter. The ships themselves were still missing. Where were the Erebus and Terror? For decades, they were the holy grail of maritime archaeology. Then, in 2014, a Canadian search team, guided by modern science and ancient Inuit oral history, found a shipwreck. It was HMS Erebus. It was found 11 meters below the surface, perfectly preserved in the cold water. 2 years later, in 2016, they found her sister ship, HMS Terror, was discovered 60 miles away, in pristine condition, resting 24 meters down. The ghost ships provided the final, chilling clues. The Terror was found far south of where it was abandoned. It seems a skeleton crew may have reboarded the ship, trying one last time to sail it out before dying at their posts. Inside the Erebus, divers found a world frozen in time. Plates stacked, ready for a meal, books on shelves, scientific instruments laid out as if they were just used, and in the ship's pantry they found the cans, the lead-soldered cans that sealed their fate. The mystery that haunted the world for nearly 170 years is finally solved. The horrifying truth is not just that they died, it's how they died. Poisoned from within, their minds breaking, their bodies failing, resorting to the last taboo, and dying one by one, alone in a vast white wasteland. The ships they trusted became their tombs, and the food they trusted became their poison.